Hi, it's D Goon here, and I have an amazing interview from Reuben from Firo, and it's an amazing interview. Reuben is from the Firo cryptocurrency team, and they are one of the most well spoken, intelligent people in the crypto space who I had the pleasure of meeting. In this interview, we go over a lot of topics ranging from Firo's history to Reuben's 5 year predictions in the crypto space and the things going on with Firo. It's an amazing interview and it's a long one. So sit back, relax. You're guaranteed to learn something and grow your knowledge in the crypto space. And I want to say thank you again, Ruben, for giving me this interview. It was a great one. And let's get to it. All right. So we should be live right now. But yeah, I was just telling Ruben how I watched your last interview. So yeah, I'm down to let you talk. I have some prepared questions. Like I mean, because you've been in the specifically crypto space, you said full time 2016, but you started before then at your VPN business, right?
Yeah, full time the end of 20 I think at the end of 2017 I went full time.
Hmm.
But I've been in, I guess, crypto, I think like early 2013 or something like that. So yeah, I mean relatively early, but they are much more early adopters. But yeah, although I started a VPN business in 2007, which is how I went down the whole rabbit hole of crypto and privacy coins. And but I actually am a lawyer by profession and was actually a lawyer for about 10 years. So yeah, from around 2000. Yeah, when I started my VPN business, I was just starting to become a lawyer. So
Oh wait, so
came
you
full
started
circle.
a law business and at the same time you were doing a VPN, or you had already been a lawyer?
No, I started it at the same time. Actually, the VPN business wasn't supposed to be a big thing. It was just something for me to initially started as just a way for me to get my anime. But yeah, because actually our internet service providers started like throttling P2P connections, P2P like torrents and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So I couldn't get my fix, and all I wanted was like, hey, I want my anime, and we just kind of started this. I went on this online forum, found this random dude, and we said like, hey, let's share a server and find other people to get on it, so that we don't have to pay for the whole server ourselves. And so I got our anime fix, and suddenly we had like thousands and thousands of customers all wanting to do the same thing, and that's how the VPN business started. So it wasn't really meant to be a full time thing. It was just meant to be like a side thing, but it actually became much more profitable than being a lawyer, even though I stuck at being a lawyer for 10 years. Because I was like, this thing is gonna go like, in like 1 or 2 years. This thing's a fad or something like that. And today it's still operating, or of course it's not under my control anymore. I let go. I just like gave away my shares to my partner. I think sometime over COVID. I just wanted less things
Hmm.
to worry about. But yeah, it's still running. It's quite a long time. Yeah.
Wow. I, Ye- I feel like you should write a book about your life because I tried to do my research as best as I could. I'm like, I'm still just so impressed by the amount of things you've done. So what made you want to be when you were a kid? Did you dream about like being like a lawyer?
No, I remember that the first thing I drew when I they were asking me, oh, what do you want to be in kindergarten? And I drew like a butcher or something like that. Then I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. Then realized that required a lot of math. I didn't quite like math. Uh, and after that, I wanted to. I don't know. I really like weapons, like. And then my sister kind of like shat on me and said like, "Hey, you're gonna be designing all these things to kill people," and I felt bad, and I was like, "Fine." So yeah, I think I decided to be a lawyer because my father's a lawyer, my sister's a lawyer. Well, she used to be a lawyer, and then I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. So no butcher, no aeronautical engineer or weapons designer. So law it is.
Well, I'm so glad that you went down this winding path to be you would call yourself a I refer yourself as a Firo's maintainer, I believe, or no?
Oh yeah, like a project steward. I mean,
Project
I guess the
steward.
whole idea is that obviously I'm the guy kind of like I guess like running things,
Hmm.
but I didn't want like a title like CEO or something like that. And actually, the only reason why uh at one point I was called the COO, it was because no one wanted to talk to someone without a title in the project, right? Like when we're getting interviews and stuff like that, we're like, okay, we need something like a bit higher, and we just like put it out of our ass. Actually, our PR firm that was we engaged at the time said, "Why don't you call yourself COO so that people will give you interviews, right? Because we only speak to C level." I was like, "Oh man, this is like very anti crypto, right? I mean, like it's supposed to be decentralized, right? But let's face it, right? Most crypto projects have a face, have a personality. I don't necessarily want to be that person, but here I am. I'm looking after the project, and that's why we came up with the title Project Steward, where, yeah, I'm steering it, but I'm kind of looking after it for the community, which is how I would like to see myself in any case. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And you've been with the project since since it was founded, right?
So yeah, actually, like the whole story of how I became co-founder
Hmm.
is a bit strange. So the project started in 2016, September 2016. So we actually launched before Zcash, I think like 1 or 2 months maybe.
Oh
And
wow.
back then, I was still a lawyer. I was like involved in crypto, did
Mhm.
all the shebangs, had my own like mining setup, and I was like, hey, I really like privacy coins, especially since I was running a VPN business. I was starting to be like more aware of the importance of privacy, even though it was like through a side route through anime. uh, but um but then I was like, hey, this was a very interesting. This was a very interesting way to approach it because it was the first implementation of zero coin, which is different than the zero cash protocol. And I was like, wow, this looks really cool. And back then, Zcoin was only like two people. It was Poramin and this other guy called Gary. And I was like, hey, why don't I help out? Because I saw the potential of the project, but they seem really undermanned. And I was like,
Yeah.
why don't you guys, pay me a couple of $100 and I will, help out where I can. I'll explain things into layman terms. I will be the community manager, etc., etc. And that's kind of how it started. So technically, I'm not a co-founder because I didn't start the project. I didn't receive any sort of seed funding. I just received a couple of $100 worth in Firo to join the project. But very quickly, I think within like 2 or 3 months, a lot of things happen. And in a way, crypto then was a bit of my escape. Like, oh yeah, let's not do like law stuff. Let's try like chill and do something fun, right? And what happened was one of the co-founders like ran away with all the seed money and all of that. The Gary guy,
Oof.
yeah, yeah, he didn't represent him well. He had this whole podcast, or he was on this show with Fluffy Pony, and he just like didn't prepare, didn't just got totally creamed by Fluffy. I mean, Fluffy's well spoken and well
Oh yeah.
prepared, but yeah.
Also a
So
troll, so it must have been pretty rough. Must have been pretty rough.
yes, it was pretty rough. I mean, it was well deserved. But obviously he's out of the picture. I think he was not been in the project since like I don't know, like 2 months or 3 months after the
Hmm.
project mainnet launch, and then after that went through a lot of like ups and downs. We because all our seed money was gone, and
Oof.
we had to find a way to continue the project, right? So we brought in the seed investor. Uh, I wasn't involved in it, because I was just a community manager,
Mm-hmm.
right? And um, it became a bit of a nightmare because like the seed investor had his own plans for the project. He was very concerned about price growth, nothing about privacy and stuff like that. He was just like make this however it is, just make us rich, and it was a
Oof.
real pressure. And this is actually like, I mean, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but this is kind of why a lot of people think our rebrand was a failure, because we actually, that investor, we were cutting off ties with that
Mm-hmm.
investor at that point, and he was making it a point to strategically dump on us every time we did something important, like when we launched the Lantus, when we rebrand. He would dump on us on
Oh.
all those times, just to make a point to say, like, screw you guys. I don't care about my money. I just want to hurt you guys. And it worked. I mean, it worked. But hey, we're still alive, cockroach.
Yeah.
So could be better, but I think it was a very important lesson, which is why we've had, like, VCs approach us and say, why don't you allocate stuff? And sure, our community isn't very large, and there'll be still some a decent proportion of the community who would be just like, oh yeah, just accept some VC funding and like solve all your woes and grow that way, because this is how the project can get big and exposure. But because of that whole experience, not that I'm totally against it. There are some good VCs, but as we saw in the last cycle, they can they can be your Achilles heel as well. And I feel for a decentralized project, especially, we're not a new one anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I rather just keep it as a community run project, and that's what we're trying to do here. Despite, I would say, quite modest funding when compared to many other projects. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and congratulations, you guys definitely punch way above your weight, especially funding research like Atlantis, which is a amazing jump
Hmm.
forward in privacy. Right now, from the research, is looking to be the like the real like Zcash competitor when it comes to technology. And like y'all are all funding that. I remember the mining. Y'all are all community fund. There's no dev tax, right?
There is a dev tax, so
Wait,
I mean,
okay.
like, it depends how you view it. So, I think it's like 15% of the block reward goes towards us, and I know some people say, "Oh, you guys
Mm-hmm.
are like, getting rich off it." Dude, it's only 16,000 Firo, which is like what, 30 plus thousand US dollars a month.
Oh
And
yeah,
you take a
that's
like, come on, it's like, if you want
yeah.
us to be at the cutting edge, and I would say all of us are operating way below the market rate. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think Zuko's salary is one of his salary probably can fund two of our Firo teams,
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
yeah, so I mean, I know how people feel about it, but the way that we do it, like, you can just see the exact amount, and even the way that we
Mm-hmm.
sell our tokens, it's very, it shouldn't have a market impact and stuff like that. It's not a big amount of money. If you take a look at our volume, 30,000 US dollars over 30 days is really a drop in the
Yeah,
water, right?
yeah, that makes sense.
So I think people should look past that and see what are we actually delivering for that value of money. And I think you'll be very, very hard pressed to see any project survive with that sort of funding. So yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I misspoke. I meant there's no founders reward, right?
Yes, correct.
Versus like
No more, no
Zcash's
more.
founders award.
There was a founders reward early on. It was how we brought in of course, I had no say in that, right?
Hmm.
But all of that has ceased already, and none of it goes to the founders. I think I'm not sure how all their holdings are right now, but I don't think they are forming a significant proportion of the current distribution of fear. I think our despite what the some explorers say, because a lot of our users keep stuff on Binance, unfortunately, and that's
Oof,
just
tough.
that's just the way it is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm.
But yeah, so I mean, looking at the funding model, I know Monero has like no block
Yes.
cut. You
Hmm.
have a community dev fund. Then Zcash
Hmm.
has like dev tax, dev fund. There's also there one other thing. No, I think it's just
I think they have
combined
a
in
foundation one and
foundation.
the one to the ECC, right? So I think there are two funds. We have one that comes from the community fund and one that comes just direct to the core team. We are trying
Mm,
to transition more towards the community fund, but there has to be a transition period. You cannot just go bam straight into full community governance. But
mm-hmm,
we are starting to see quite interesting proposals come out. Now, our market making is being funded by our community. There's been some marketing proposals like, Vosto and Misio, which I think also put in a proposal for Monero as well.
mm-hmm.
And we are also funding certain, I guess like more of like start with the easy, low hanging fruit like community management, marketing, and then market making. That means like I don't think it's a good idea for the core team to be market making because it just
Makes sense.
the optics look bad, right? It makes it seem that we
Yeah.
may be dumping and stuff or manipulating. So I think it's good that that is separated from the core team, and our funding is just like totally used to just spend on basic most of it is salaries, keeping the infrastructure up.
Mm-hmm.
We actually are pretty transparent. You like take a look at the forums or our finances up. We publish it like periodically and stuff. It's not a lot of money. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean
No.
you can just
Yeah.
do the math, right? 16,000 Firo, like, well, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna give you like super detailed accounting of every single item, but what we're spending it on. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, y'all put out some great work like Lantis, the whole Spark progression is beautiful. And going back to day one where you I don't know if the team tried to do or did actually do zero knowledge proofs with RSA. I think that is like I feel like people don't get what that means, like
Yeah.
like how big of a deal that is to do. You had zero knowledge proofs without trusted setup back
Hmm.
at launch 2016, even before
Oh,
Zcash
no, no,
launched.
no. So we had no trusted setup. I think maybe like 2 years after we started with a trusted setup, but the trusted setup was
Ah,
very different. And
oh,
I think
okay.
Peter Todd actually commented one time and said like, oh, the way that Zcoin does the trusted setup is very smart and different because what happened was so like how in Zcash the trusted setup ceremony, you involve I would say like 6 people or 8 people. I
Hmm.
can't remember the original one, the origin
Yeah.
sprout one, where there is like it's not a big group of people and they are setting it up with the explicit knowledge that this is going to be creating a cryptocurrency which might create a backdoor. So that creates all sorts of like potential incentives to backdoor
Hmm.
that, right? While for Zcoin or Firo as it then was, the zero coin only basically needed like a prime, what do you call it, like two prime numbers, right? Which is that is the trusted setup. And so
Mm.
what we did is that we used the RSA factoring challenge, which was in 1991, where I think the RSA Labs had this competition, this academic competition, basically to say, oh, how hard is it to break RSA? And we obviously picked the 40961 one, and of course, the challenge ended like I don't know how many years ago, but up to that point, no one has broken it. I don't know anyone has broken RSA 4096 yet. I think it'll be a while, maybe until quantum stuff.
Yeah.
But you see, the difference is that that was created for academic challenge, and they did do stuff to like prevent they destroyed the hardware and stuff like that. But the trap level for creating a factoring challenge for academic challenge is very very different than creating a new cryptocurrency, right? So there's much less incentive to backdoor. Why would you backdoor a challenge meant to test the strength of RSA cryptography, right? Because
Yeah.
if you have the backdoor, then it kind of defeats the whole point of the challenge, right? So, and the difference is also that we had no role in that trusted setup, right? I mean, like
Mm.
it's a totally different team. There's no reason for us to do a backdoor. We were not involved in that. So the trust, although both of it is a trusted setup at that point
Mhm.
in time, it's very different, right? The risks and all of that is, I would say, is much better than the original Zcash trusted setup ceremony.
And that was the
So
ceremony you had when you first um
mm,
launched using the original zero.
yes, the zero
Okay.
coin one. So we just took the factoring challenge in 1991,
Okay.
which we had noding. We placed those things, just the, when you multiply the two prime numbers together. I
Mhm.
don't know what you call that. Then you use that as the, like, the seed, or to create this zero coin accumulator. Yeah.
And when did y'all transition away from that? I don't want to call that, I guess, a trusted setup. I don't want to call that the prime number competition being like a
Mm-hmm.
security requirement. When y'all transition away from that?
Mm-hmm. I think Sigma, was it in like
Sigma.
2000?
Okay.
Yeah. So Sigma was basically started using ECC uh curves, to replace the
Mhm.
RSA thing, and that was from a paper. I think it was called like one out of many proofs. And I think we transitioned away in 2019, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh wow, yeah, the one
So
minute proof comes up in the Atlantis paper a lot too. Also, right?
yes, correct. So it's actually an evolution, right? So we started with zero coin, then we did
Mhm.
Sigma, which was basically replacing the accumulator with, one out of many proofs, which doesn't require a trusted setup. And then after that, we're like, hey, obviously, there's a lot of limitations with Sigma and zero coin, because you had to, like, early days of Monero, you kind of have to burn and redeem in fixed denominations, right? Like,
Mhm.
and that was kind of a problem, right? Like, you burn 10, you redeem 10, and then you want to, burn like 153.5 coins. You have to, like, use so many different denominations, and those patterns are a point of metadata, right? So we were like, oh, well, how do we solve this, right? And that's how we came up with Lelantus to begin with. And we were like, look, we want to be able to burn arbitrary amounts and redeem arbitrary amounts. So it means, like, I burn 153.5, I can redeem zero point 0.2 without having to reveal like it came from the 153.5, right? So that was like that was Lelantus.
Mhm.
And then we brought it to, actually, there's something called Lelantus version 2, which we never quite launched, but it was in the paper. It was a way to totally hide amounts and transact using the same thing, but we did without having to expose the amount. But it lacked a stealth addressing system, and we're like, yeah, we could deploy this thing. And we were like, it's still not perfect. Let's try to find another way to do it. And that's how Spark came about, right? So we never deployed Lelantus version 2, because we're like, let's solve this once and for all. And that's how Spark came about, which incorporates all these elements. So you can see the evolution from
Mhm.
zero coin, removing trusted setup, removing the fixed denominations and hiding amounts, and getting the stealth addressing. So it's taken us a while, but I think it is a very, I don't think there's any other player in the space that's been taking this approach. Like, everyone else is kind of looking at like general ZK approaches. Of course, like, now Monero's also having like a similar structure with Seraphis and stuff like that. But like, I think we were the ones that kind of spearheaded this tree of research, that rather than looking at generalized ZK circuits and stuff like that, we're looking at more, I guess, more basic cryptographic primitives that makes it a lot easier to understand and audit. And
Mhm.
especially if a decentralized protocol, that's super important, because while quite a few people may understand, like, the basic idea of how Zcash works and how all these like circuits work, and it's of course improving every day,
Mhm.
but it's still a very, very small amount of people that actually get it, which tends to lead to centralization in the core team. Because let's face it, you can't really replace the ECC at this point in time in Zcash. It's just
Yeah.
like too much know-how, and they know too much about the protocol, that if you switch away, you lose a lot of the nuances of deploying that protocol. While something like Lelantus and Lelantus Spark, hey, it's like, look, Seraphis came about. I think even if we disappear, there will be qualified people to be able to take over this protocol. So I think that's a underrated uh, pro of our protocol. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely beautiful. I think and I used to have this viewpoint when I was also new to the space that you should just go with the quote unquote like quickest, lightest, fast verification times, but lacking the diversity is really bad. Because eventually, if everyone just went with Zcash, well, if there's a problem in engineering, then
Hmm.
every coin's effective. Versus, I love the fact that Firo, from the start, we're gonna do something completely independent. We're gonna do it right. We're gonna do it slow, no trusted setup. Well, no private trusted setup. Like no privileged trusted setup in that way. It just progress in such a beautiful, independent manner. The only people in
Hmm.
the privacy space, I'll say in the crypto space, doing something that's actually independent research that's not generalized zero knowledge. But I really commend y'all for it. It's really hard, especially only
Yeah.
doing it on like what some relatively small amount of money for a dev team. With Zcash is like swimming in cash. They got like pull
Millions.
up in Lambos. It's like man, it's really tough. But also, I want to talk. I know you were a community manager, and you do a
Hmm.
really beautiful job about I say communicating your project without shilling it or selling it or over promising too much. How
Hmm.
do you balance promoting a project but also informing users about the limitations of that project, what it can do, what it can't do? There's some other coins, I won't name them. They're like,
Yeah.
our coin does everything. We do,
Mm.
there's no way gonna get hacked. It's everything, does everything, everything. Like, you seem to have a really honest and balanced viewpoint. Could you share how you walk us through that process?
Well, first of all, I mean, of course, people don't really trust lawyers, but I would say like I'm a different kind of lawyer. Like, it's something that my father like kind of imparted to me to say
Mm-hmm,
that if you hold yourself above board, you will attract the people that do these things, right? That means like if you do, if you're willing to do dirty stuff, if you're willing to like, lie and stuff like that, you will attract that kind of clientele, right? But if you hold yourself to be an upfront person, like with high moral values and stuff like that, the
mm-hmm.
kind of people that you attract would have that same amount of integrity and the firm that I used to work in has those values. Like people come to us because we have a good reputation. We are not known for like cheating or like like twisting here and there.
Mm-hmm.
So people trust us, right? And I guess that kind of like translated to even though I'm no longer part of the firm, how I view things, right? It's like yeah, sure, I can be spreading like complete misinformation, complete lies and stuff like that, but I will attract a community like that, right? And how I hope I like I really, this is like a personal pet peeve. And sure, maybe this isn't the like some people may argue this isn't the best for the project, right? Because you take
Mm-hmm.
a look at the crypto space, there's just so much like fluff, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and sometimes you kind of like the whole Silicon Valley culture of like fake it till you make it is still prevalent in crypto, right? Like I mean,
Mm-hmm.
take a look at FTX, fake it till you make it,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like that was yeah, and all these things like you look past it, there's really not much behind it, right? And sure, that's a way to get big, and sometimes after faking it till you make it, then you can legitimize. I mean, this is the common pattern, but I I mean, maybe like of course, logically speaking, that is the right path to go, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of if you're caring about market size and adoption and stuff like that, but I guess I just felt like this world is nuanced. I don't want to be promoting a simplistic view of the world
Mm-hmm.
because that to me is one of the biggest problems of the world today, right? Everyone's just like, oh, you're either with us or against us, right? Or this thing is either bad or good, or like cancel culture and all
Mm-hmm.
of that. And that's the same with privacy. I mean, it sounds like on a tangential point,
Mm-hmm.
but it's related, right? Because other people will say our privacy protocol is like the best, the highest privacy, the highest everything,
Yeah.
everything else sucks. I mean, that's how it usually is, right? But it tends to create this kind of like echo chamber and say that, are you being intellectually honest about yourself? And if you are
Mm-hmm.
intellectually honest about yourself, you can take steps to rectify those shortcomings, right?
Yeah.
Like I would say, like, things like even stuff like Bitcoin, right? Suffer from this kind of thing because they kind of dug themselves into this hole of like, yeah, 21 million only, right? There's not going to be any other emission, it's fine, we're not going to introduce anything, ossification, small blocks, everything is good.
Mm-hmm.
And people would still vast, like very vehemently defend that and say, like, Bitcoin's the best, everything else is a shit coin. And look, I
Yeah.
love Bitcoin, there's no thing, but you can see that the intellectual rigor in Bitcoin, like take a look at what the Bitcoin circles are talking right now. It's
Yeah.
just sometimes feels a bit like a circle jerk, and they are not at the forefront of blockchain development, right? And
Yeah.
obviously they will say like, oh yeah, whatever other cool things that other people develop, we can do it too. That's simply not true, right? I mean, like, like now they're trying to come up with shitty smart contracts, shitty NFTs, and the only thing that is that, oh yeah, it's on Bitcoin, therefore it's great, right? When actually you take a look, like, no, you basically just created a shitcoin on top of Bitcoin, right? And like, at the same time, even stuff like Lightning, like, I think Lightning has its role, its purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and but to serve as this all-in-one catch-all scaling solution that will solve everything, which even the authors themselves, the original authors, say like that's not what it was designed to do. It was just meant a way to just open a payment channel and like reduce the amount of stuff, but not this whole convoluted like network of things. And people get intellectually lazy. Maxi culture is intellectual laziness because you're not going to accept any sort of challenge to your own preconceived ideals and just hammer everything down that doesn't be, because it's very comfortable, right? If I believe that this is it, I don't have to really think. I just repeat everything that is being fed to me, right? And you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
this, people don't really have much independent thought. And I wanted to create a community that was different. So if you take a look at our privacy guides that compare Firo with other crypto projects, I still think it's a guide that I'm quite proud of. Of course, I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe it needs to be updated, but I think it's relatively. Uh, I would, well, of course, there's some bias, but like it tries to be fair, and I think it does
Yeah.
a decent, good job in laying out the pros and cons of each protocol, including our own. So yeah, I mean, how do I balance that? Maybe I don't really balance it that well. I always make it a point to uh to be honest, but at the same time, as I have grown into this role and seen like the realities of it, of course I'm not going to start lying and stuff like that. But obviously when I am I my point of view right now is that I'm not going to lie. I'm going to, if people ask, definitely, or in the academic like academic documentation, all
Mm-hmm.
these flaws will be, or like the downsides will be elaborated. But obviously when you're putting out like an announcement and stuff like that, you will put out your best foot forward and link
Yeah.
them to the paper that lists all these other small things that academics would get, people who actually care. Most people don't really care. They just like, I'm the best, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's a balance of selling your product and making it look good, while still being intellectually honest. And it's a constant balancing act. I don't know if I've gotten that right balance yet, but yeah, it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
I can say that, yeah.
Yeah. And if anything that your team and Fire has done is shown that y'all can definitely iterate and grow. I mean, it's not even a decade yet, and look how far y'all have come. So I want to give you congratulations on that. A lot of iteration and time
Yeah.
going. And just to talk more about iteration, I know y'all are talking about changing your proof of your mining proof of stake Is there
Mhm.
talks going about how that's going to progress? You want to, or if you're at liberty, I don't want to get behind the
No, no,
scenes
no, no.
info.
I mean, there's no behind the scenes.
Okay.
We are a decentralized project. Of course, I
Uh huh.
have my own personal points of view and
Yeah.
ideas, but ultimately, it's not just a decision
Mm-hmm.
alone, right? But I guess the idea is that obviously, when we started, it was a pure proof of work protocol. We
Mm-hmm.
liked the whole idea of it. We were actually originally, as I think you during the last Twitter Spaces, we were like totally CPU miner, but we loved the idea behind it, right? One
Mm-hmm.
CPU, one vote. How that actually pans out. Of course, people would say, "Oh yeah, Monero is testament to that proof of work works." And yeah, I think it works for Monero, as I mentioned, because like there's a synergy between the miners and its use case, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
CPU mining, like it or not, obviously a big portions of it are being run by botnets, and botnets love Monero because they are the same ones that do ransomware. They say, of course there's nuance and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but there is a natural synergy, right? But for a project like ours, which hasn't been used in I could say ransomware yet, because we're probably too small for that at this point in time. uh CPU mining has actually opened us to very unfair distributions, right? Because botnets are unfair distribution. If someone controls a botnet, they are operating at a much lower cost basis than someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we kind of trended towards GPU mining, because GPU mining is that, yeah, sure, I may get some economies of scale by buying graphics cards in bulk and whatnot, but it's not going to be that different, right? Because even when you scale up, there are also additional costs. Because if I just mine with my home PC, I'm already using it for other things, and like I don't have to have a technician and all these like fancy
Yeah.
cooling setups or rent or anything like that. So I think it's kind of like even playing field, and we weren't aware of any large GPU botnets. Maybe there are now, but I still think it's a lot less than CPU botnets.
That makes sense.
But what we quickly realize is that unless you are the dominant coin in a specific hardware class, you will be always open to attacks. So Monero is the dominant power in CPU mining, right?
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So let's say if you have another
Okay.
CPU mineable coin, those people can 51% attack that other coin and be like, that thing's dead, but I still have Monero to mine, right? But
Ah, okay.
if I kill Monero, I'm killing myself, because then, well, is there going to be another coin that will take its place, right? So my incentives are aligned to
Mm.
keep the big guy alive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, like with Ethereum, right? Yeah, is GPU mining, is it really secure? With Ethereum, no, even GPU miners hated Ethereum. Like they were like, no, and like almost like Ethereum almost like went off their way to screw GPU miners, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, cut them from the fees, cut them from this, totally
Yeah.
move to proof of
Yeah.
stake and all of that. But all the GPU miners were still mining Ethereum, right? and
Yeah.
and and it is unlikely for them to attack it, because that was
Mm.
their breadbasket, right? And so I feel like that kind of aligns incentives. Like I don't want to kill the golden goose, if that's the thing, right? And this is why you people will say, well, why don't we embrace ASICs, right? Because although ASICs is more decentralized, it's more centralized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when you create an ASIC for a particular ASICs don't solve everything, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah.
example, they say, oh, it's more secure because it's much higher power, which is totally bullshit. All it matters is that does someone have enough power to attack you? And let's use Zcash as an example, right? Quite early on, Equihash ASICs came about, right? And they were the dominant coin for Equihash,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a lot of other coins also use Equihash as well. And when those ASICs came on, there was nothing wrong like with the equihash ASIC or equihash, you know, algorithm itself. But because of the emergence of these ASICs, everyone else that was not Zcash were attacked. I think it was like Bitcoin Go and a bunch of other equihash. So
Oh.
even though they were like ASIC minded, they were attacked by these ASICs as well. So the takeaway is that if you are the dominant coin for that hardware class, and ASICs is dependent on the algorithm, right? It's not just ASICs as a whole, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
a Bitcoin ASIC is different than a Zcash ASIC. But if you are not the dominant, proof of work is a very crappy way to secure your coin, right? This is great for distribution, but as a security model, if you are not the dominant one, it's a very poor way to secure your coin, because people can attack you. And like, you know, if someone attacked Firo and we stop the exists, it wouldn't really affect GPU mining profitability that much as a whole, right? Yeah. But if you
So
attack maybe like Raven coin, then then suddenly, oh, what are we going to mine now, right? You know.
So are you advocating for a Firo ASIC?
No, I'm not advocating for that. I think it's a, you know, what I'm saying is that proof of work alone, as beautiful as it sounds,
that makes
is
sense.
not a secure way to secure a smaller project that is not the dominant coin in a particular hardware class. Oh my god,
No,
that's
that
just
makes
such
perfect
a
sense.
mouthful.
Like
Yeah.
I know Grand recently came, not recently, but like a couple years, and they got, I mean, just wrecked.
Yeah.
They got wrecked.
And
Oh, that's
Beam
really
also got
cool.
wrecked.
Yeah.
And we also got attacked 51% attack. Someone actually hired a GPU farm to attack us, right? And we had to bear all this stress, and it's like, and even now, like, GPU miners hate us, right? We created, we didn't create, we adopted an algorithm that would have made GPUs the only hardware that could mine on us, right? And that means there's certain trade-offs, right? Because when you're a small coin, no one bothers to build an ASIC. People maybe not even bother to build an FPGA for you, right? But once you get to a certain market cap, then people are like, oh yeah, you know, maybe I should build an FPGA, reconfigure an FPGA for you, build an ASIC for it, right? Then the thing goes on. So there's actually a lot of like subpar GPU mineable, GPU friendly algorithms that can have FPGAs and stuff. And it's just that they're not big market cap enough for anyone to care. Right?
That makes sense.
But for us, we went down the road to say, let's use an algorithm that actually makes the GPU the ASIC, right? So proc power. So we know Christy, or God, a girl, who got a lot of flack for it, but she created this algorithm called proc power that was designed to utilize the GPU almost to its like maximum use, all its thing, and including its flexibility and everything, to make GPUs the best fit. So it's kind of like, instead of tailoring an algorithm to be ASIC resistant, which I think is an exercise in folly. We tried that, you know, with MTP and all of that. But instead, make your hardware target the hardware that you want and tailor the algorithm to that hardware. So random X is the CPU equivalent of proc power that it is to GPUs, right? So you tailor the algorithm to make CPUs the ASIC. You tailor the algorithm to make proc power the ASIC. But what that also means is that it's going to be utilizing your graphics card, like at a very high level that is designed to operate within those limits. But it means that it's going to be hot. It's going to be, you know, stuff like that, right? And GPU miners are up in arms saying, oh, why don't you create a algorithm that's more GPU friendly? You know, actually, this is like, look, first of all, you know, it's a myth that operating your hot GPU, you know, I think it's been tested many times. As long as it's within the design limits, you're not going to burn or reduce its life. It's going to last 10 years or something like that, right? Other things will happen before that. So, but because, you know, there's all this other stuff. I mean, it gets a bit complicated, but, you know, what I'm saying is that I'm kind of think that proof of work is great for decentralization, and there's no need for maintaining any sort of special nodes. It's great for distribution, provided that the algorithm is mineable using commodity hardware, because ASICs don't really help with distribution, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if that's the case, then but if proof of work alone is not very good at securing, because 51% attacks, as we have seen, are very prevalent, right?
Yeah.
And there are several ways that you can solve it. None of them are totally elegant. So what some projects do is that they say, oh, let's have a max reorg limit. You can only reorganize the chain up to 5 blocks deep or something like that, right? And sure, but then it kind of makes your final confirmation within 5 confirmations, and they're like, okay, that's one way to solve it. I think Beam does something like that.
Mhm.
But what we do instead is we have another layer of master nodes, which was adopted from Dash and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which allows the nodes to kind of form form quorums of 400 master nodes each, and they are randomly kind of chosen, and they then
Okay.
sign the block. So they effectively checkpoint the block as to what was the block that was first seen, right? And they will not accept any block that is conflicting with that block. So it becomes like a 2-layer thing. That means now I have the master nodes checkpointing each block. So that means one block confirmation is final. And secondly, if the master nodes go off for any reason, I still have that proof of work Satoshi Nakamoto consensus that still provides some level of security. So it's kind of like a balance.
And
Now,
would you say, master nodes are sort of like proof of stake ish? Because I imagine you need a lot of capital to have a master node, or I could be wrong.
Obviously, different protocols have different ways. Master nodes aren't theoretically, they're not proof of stake, because you're not using your stake to show, but it's just more of like proof of skin in the game. The only reason why you have it is for Sybil resistance, right? Because if I can spin out 1 million master nodes without any sort of collateral, then I can take over the network, right? It's like a 51% attack based on nodes, right? By requiring that collateral, then I'm functionally limiting how many master nodes you can have, because you have to acquire it.
That makes sense. But they can't be slashed, so it's not like a
correct.
They can't
There's
lose
no
that stake.
slash.
Okay. That's really cool. Huh.
Yeah. So I mean, this is not our idea. It was a Dash idea, and I think they get a lot of hate. But I thought back then it was actually quite an innovative thing, and I still think today it's still quite smart. Like it doesn't. It has its own like pros and cons. But it works, and it does it to a decent degree with a good amount of good trade-offs, right? But because a lot of people see Dash as a scam, and there was this whole, I think in like 2017, 2018 was like the master node era where everyone was launching master nodes, right? It was like the NFT craze thing, and that kind of like gave a bad name to master nodes, right? So obviously, right now, there are like more new, like modern consensus algorithms, like stuff like Avalanche or whatnot, and of course with all their own pros and cons. But I feel that like master nodes are still okay. They will serve their function, but the problem is that if you have seen most of the hybrid systems, like for example Decred or Dash or whatnot, you will come to a point, especially if you're following a Bitcoin type of schedule where your emission is dropping. Master nodes are also doing this for a return, right? So how do you keep the master nodes incentivized to continue maintaining their node, because they earn part of the block reward, and to keep a sufficient number of them up so that they provide decent enough security and enough decentralization? So right now we have like 4,600 nodes or something like that.
Okay.
But let's say the reward, like in like 1 year or so, gets slashed in half. If the price stays the same, the rate of return is still the same. Right now it's like 15% per annum. It will drop to like 8% per annum. Maybe half of the master nodes go. You'll be 2,000 plus nodes, right? And then you repeat that every 4 years. and that security that's provided by the master nodes is getting less and less and less and less and less, right? So there is a problem, right? And it's a similar problem
Yeah.
to mining as well, but it's just that Bitcoin has been like keep on multiplying in US dollar price, so it's been fine. I feel that they will hit that, but that is a separate conversation. But
Yeah.
so you see that all these other protocols that are having master nodes are constantly upping the master node percentage to the point that proof of work is becoming less and less a proportion of it, to the point of that if you're going to be most of the block rewards goes to master nodes, then what's the point of proof of work? You might as well just totally move to some other proof of stake consensus mechanism and stuff like that, which is fine, right? I think what Ethereum did is quite decent, although it's like have a longish proof of work phase for distribution and then move to proof of stake at the end to kind of like secure the network, and you don't have to do all this like constant price appreciation to justify things,
Yeah.
right? So we are looking to say, like, I'm not sure how the community will look at this, but right now, like, eventually we are moving away from the hybrid system. I wouldn't say that it's that soon, right? But I feel that maybe with the next halving, we have to have a clear path forward to move away from this masternode system, or else we are just effectively secured just with masternodes and not proof of work anymore. And then it's like, well, let's just move to a better proof of stake-ish system, right? Like Avalanche or whatever that is out there, right? So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. We're still in the research state because obviously we have a lot of stuff on our plate.
Yeah.
But this is just kind of like the considerations that happen when you're not just looking at the security and the performance or TPS of the consensus mechanism, but like saying like, okay, does it fit your tokenomics? Does it fit your emission schedule? And I think it is very unlikely for us to go back to a pure proof of work model, just because for the reasons I have
Yeah.
elaborated before. Yeah, and let's face it, I think proof of work, the fact that you have to wait X number of confirmations, it's kind of a shitty user experience. and
Yeah.
and remember, X number of confirmation is subjective, right? Like, people say, oh yeah, you should be fine with 3 or 6 confirmation. That is an arbitrary kind of determination that people parrot, but the security changes from time to time, right? Like, maybe
Yeah.
sometimes 2 confirmations, sometimes 6 confirmations is not enough. It depends, right? And I feel that is very dangerous to just rely on that. And yeah, anyway, I talked too much on that.
No, that's a big issue. I know, especially when you're looking at like privacy coins, and people say, oh, you should never, like, let's say that this block has this amount of money in it. If it's a privacy coin, you don't know how much money has been transferred, thus you don't know how much money is at risk, right? So you can't really get a good estimation. Or am I thinking wrong about that? Because like, generally people say, yeah.
No, there's no issue with that, because you can always do fees based on the size of the transaction, which has to be public.
The size gets you back to the. All right, never mind.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Also, I know in another interview I just watched. Sorry, I keep referencing them. You mentioned about the decreasing block subsidy, and I know Firo has a similar to Bitcoin mission schedule where it halves every couple of years. Do you think it's possible? I know you also said like code isn't law. Because as far as I know, no coin has ever changed their monetary policy and not forked off, essentially, right? Do you think it's possible for a project to realize is it possible for someone like, let's say something like Litecoin is like, oh, well, actually, this is actually bad. Do you think it's possible to get enough consensus to actually change the monetary policy?
I mean, Ethereum has changed. Ethereum has changed its monetary policy.
True.
Right? So
yeah. Okay.
Oh, and obviously, there was, there's some things that, oh yeah, is fake consensus, and I mean fake like fake governance or whatnot, and all that sort of stuff, and we're trying to do our best. Obviously, governance is a very tricky topic on its own, and I find pure coin voting to be like a bit of a red herring. Is to me is always governance theater when it's just based on coin voting, right? Like,
wasn't there a coin that like voted, then like rescinded the vote recently, or like
Yeah,
didn't.
I think was it Arbitrum, I
Yeah.
think is it? Yeah. I mean, there's even that has nuance to the topic, right? Where the vote was actually more of like a sentiment check vote, which it was.
Ah.
But then it's like, well, if you do the sentiment check and the sentiments against you, then what are you gonna do about it, right? Why hold it in the first place if you don't intend to go through with it? I mean, like, that goes into its own set of weeds, but I don't see, obviously, I would say like vast changes in monetary policy, in terms of the emission of the coin,
Hmm.
are can be seen as setting a dangerous precedent, right? For a project like ours, which is relatively small, I think we are much more flexible in that regard. I think more community people get okay. Let's put it this way: there's this other project that has done very well from their revamp token emission, which was Flux,
Ooh,
and
fuck.
and they actually almost like doubled the supply, or even tripled the supply.
Holy
And
smoke.
they did it in such a cool, like, I would say it's smart. Of course, some people may say it's dishonest, but they diluted everyone, but people could be undiluted, because what they did was they issued all these new coins, but they say these coins exist on other chains. So like you can claim an airdrop from Binance Smart Chain, you can claim an airdrop from all these other chains that have the Flux token, but it's like different,
Interesting.
they're on separate things. So that means if I'm holding Flux on the native chain, I can then claim the Binance Smart Trade Flux. I can claim the thing. So it has been inflated, but I can, as long as I'm diligent about claiming my airdrops, I would not be diluted, which is quite a smart way to do it. To say I'm
Ah.
diluting you, but not really if you are diligent about not that, which actually forces miners and other people to be more active participants in your ecosystem, because if they do not participate, they get diluted. So I thought it was very smart. I think they call it the whole parallel assets thing. You can look it up and whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, some people say, oh, it's a bit like, scammy and whatnot. I thought it was pretty smart, because I don't totally agree with how it was done. I mean, like, I feel that many people don't really know what it is, but I thought it was quite a smart way to change your supply, give yourself a they also, like, granted themselves a additional portion for the dev team and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Uh, and as you said, wisdom of the crowd, democracy only works when all your participants and voters are educated and have all the facts at hand, which is generally quite rare. And it went through. I think it did very well. I think the whole idea of forcing participation of your miners and your ecosystem is a great thing, because that's what you want, right? You want people to be participating in your ecosystem and using your product. So I thought that was quite, I guess, a master stroke. But how it relates to Firo, I did, like, kind of like float this idea. It didn't really, like, as I said, I was just a sentiment check. People were like kind of like on the fence on it. So hopefully I've been trying to float this idea of the tail emission and stuff like that, which to me is, I would say, a relatively uncontroversial thing. Of course, to me,
Hmm.
it's uncontroversial, but to some people, it might be controversial. But I see that it's possible. Like I don't think it is set in law. But if you say, like, suddenly, oh yeah, give 50% of the supply to Reuben, oh yeah, obviously that something like that wouldn't pass, right? So I think that we have to be nuanced about it. Certain changes are possible and certain
Hmm.
changes are not. And there has to be a clear justification for it. But as a smaller project with a smaller community, obviously it's easier to change things. And as you right, like, if things aren't working out, if stuff, like, I actually foresee, like, the way the token emission and the way mining is gonna work, they're gonna hit a problem unless Bitcoin keeps on doubling in price every
Hmm.
4 years, which I think is unsustainable. Like, they has to hit the point of maturity. You cannot keep on doing it, and we already see evidence of it, right? Bitcoin's price growth is not as exponential as it has been, and that makes sense, right? Because most
Yeah.
people have heard of Bitcoin, and yeah, so yeah, I think it's a nuanced topic, and I would say that people should. It's hard, right? Because people who aren't really into it and dive into all of this may not get the nuance, and it's so easy to just say, 21 million code is law. Once you start changing it, you're a scam. It's so much
Yeah.
intellectually, lazily easier to think like that, because then I don't have to consider anything else, right? Yeah.
Wow. You gave me a lot to chew. I know you're very busy, so I'm gonna wrap it
Yeah,
up.
that's
I'm gonna
fine.
ask just some
Sure.
questions around like
Mhm.
Firo's like future. I know you guys talk a lot about DeFi and privacy.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate more about what that might look like? I know you're gonna engage the sentiment of the community, but what in your head, where is Firo's role? What role does Firo play in the future DeFi privacy plays somewhere between Zcash, Ethereum? I know you guys talk about getting assets, something that Monero doesn't seem to
Mhm.
want to have either. Can you elaborate more about that?
Yeah, so I think the idea, there's a lot of like shit being thrown about DeFi that is a scam, especially among
Hmm.
the crypto should only be currency because it's cryptocurrency. Yeah, again, one of those maxi type of views, right? But the thing is that I think there are certain use cases of DeFi that make it very attractive. Like I think, okay, like we're not trying to create a something like another Luna or something like that, right? But let's face it, AMMs, automated market makers, are a good innovation, right?
Yeah.
The ability to create pairs for whatever it is, and create markets out of thin air is exactly what a privacy coin should want, right? And you should, let's do order book based. Yes, there are order book based decentralized exchanges, but as a regular Joe, it is much easier for me to say I park my liquidity into an AMM and just chill, right? And sure, may not be the most efficient. You may be, you may lose a bit because of the like what do you call it, arbitrage, right?
Hmm.
But the thing is that it's easy for people to get, right? I get into it, I place my liquidity, and now it's community provided liquidity, right? I don't have to rely on market makers or anything like that. That is the beauty of AMMs, right? And and I think it's
Mm.
one of the biggest things. And to have a AMM, you need some form of smart contracts, at least some sort of things. And that to me is my goal. I want to have some sort of AMM, maybe I haven't like completely figured out like how it would
Hmm.
look like, but I think AMMs, the ability, and also if you have some sort of smart contract functionality, it's much easier to do cross-chain stuff, because then you can lock assets that you bridge over into a smart contract and stuff like that, or to recognize the lock on something else. If you don't have that kind of rich language, it is quite tough to achieve that. So of course we're still trying to find like a nice balance, because I don't think something like Firo needs like super rich, expressive, do whatever you want and
Mm.
and and and, and stuff. But I do think the idea of a crypto ecosystem, because how I view it is that, yeah, Firo I don't ever want it not to be a currency, but if other
Hmm.
people can use our protocol and have the same kind of privacy guarantees as Firo. And the way that we have designed our Spark assets means that whatever asset that comes into our protocol, whether you create it on Firo or you bridge it over, when you transact with it, it increases the anonymity set of all other assets, including Firo. That means it's like the anonymity set is shared. The asset type is hidden. So when I'm transferring like Digun coin on Firo, or Firo itself,
Oh.
or
Huh.
something else, it's all indistinguishable from each other. So this is a problem, like let's say like the current Tornado Cash have, where yeah, I can have privacy, but it's only within that asset pool, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if USDT or USDC, I have to see, is a lot of people using DAI, is a lot of people using USDT, right? But because in Spark assets, which is coming, it hides the asset type, so I don't have to care. It may be, maybe there are only 2 or 3 people using my meme dog coin on Firo, right? But the anonymity set is everyone else, right? It doesn't really matter as long as other people are using my protocol, and that I think also improves Firo's anonymity properties and gives it much higher plausible deniability, right? Because I could be transacting something, I could be voting, I could be whatever, right? And I see that as a way to kind of be in between Zcash and Ethereum, right? But the focus is still being a privacy platform, privacy protocol, with all this, I don't want it to be too rich until we have to have hacks and all of that. We still have to design it, obviously, but this is kind of like the goal of how I see things, and I think Spark Assets is like kind of the first step into that. Yeah.
I feel like you say things like I feel like you speak as if you're not saying like profound things. Like, I feel like you just drop gems all the time. That's pretty amazing because like people being in the Monero space or like spend a lot of time with people are like, why do I want this, NFT stuff on my chain or these coins? It's like, but if you can use those coins to increase the anonymity to everyone, it betters everyone, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is the privacy argument for assets classes, even if I don't personally participate in like DeFi. That's a really is that your original argument? I've never heard that privacy, assets helping privacy. Is that your original idea?
I don't know where it came from, so I guess it came from me. But
yeah, because that's really
yeah.
convincing. Yeah,
Mm.
I was talking to the NFT person, and they were like, "Well, a lot of people hate them because they think it's like versus, but if you can
It's
design
like
it,
bloat and whatnot.
yeah. Oh, that's really cool. How far along are y'all in the asset? That's pretty. Imagine that's pretty hard building a not Turing complete language, but a language capable of like being pretty expensive but secure enough. Also, seems like a lot of things to juggle when it comes to assets.
Yeah. So right now, I mean, like what we have right now is just Spark Assets, which
Mm-hmm.
allows you, and of course, we can obviously launch a cross-chain DEX and stuff like that. And obviously, there are the easy ways to do cross-chain stuff, which is, basically like kind of validator multi-sig or whatever, right? Obviously, we're still working through that. I don't think the whole space has kind of figured it all out. Like you take a look, like like Sarai and all that stuff. It's like validator, multi-sig, and stuff like that. Maybe that's the way to go. We'll see how it pans out. But right now, it's just like let's kind of take it step by step. We're building Spark Assets, which already, to me, I think people hating on NFTs and stuff. Yeah, I get it. Because a lot of let's say 90% of NFTs were scams, right?
Yeah.
But if it does help, of course, I don't know whether you should be storing the NFTs on chain or like the actual image on chain. Maybe that's bloat, right, and stuff like that. But NFTs in itself, I think is of course it's not technologically amazing. But as an idea of having a digital collectible, of having something that represents your identity, really plays into this digital world that we are having, right? In a way that I mean, like I buy Magic the Gathering cards, right?
Yeah.
Freaking
Makes sense.
cardboard, right? But then now I want them to be represented in the digital form that people agree that this is unique and I can trade it. If it gets adoption, if people have fun on it, why not, right? As long as it doesn't bloat the chain. And to me, it's fine, and which is why Spark Assets, we actually recently updated our paper to have NFT support and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean that wouldn't be stored on chain, but it's like a whole way to have Spark Assets with NFTs, and I think it's important not to forget that crypto should be fun. It shouldn't be scammy and stuff like that, but it has to be fun. And NFTs, let's face it, they're fun, right? So don't shit on it and say it's like and stuff like that. If you're doing it in an ethical way, why hate on it, right? Don't be a hater for that.
Yeah. Wow, I feel like you dropped so many gems. I have so much to to mule on, I feel like, where do you hang out? Like, do you express these ideas in other, like, do you have like a podcast that you do, or like, because I can listen to you talk about these, like, just like you're an expert. Like, no one's been doing cryptographic, like, blockchain design, running a project, communicating with the public for years as you. So you're an expert in it. Where else can people find more content like this if they want to follow more of Reuben or more Firo? You know?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really usually get the opportunity. I wish we had it. I mean, of course, we have our own YouTube
Yeah.
channel on Firo. We have like the Show Me the Firo show that
Hmm.
one of our community guy runs it, and sometimes he's more about like Firo specific updates rather than like general philosophical questions. But you're right. Maybe I should do more of this type of philosophical things and thought leadership pieces. But just sometimes, when we are a very lean team, and
Yeah.
when you are trying to run everything,
Yeah. Yeah. Doing
uh,
research, doing YouTube, doing paper. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you have to remember, I was legally trained. I was a lawyer, barrister, and then like suddenly having to keep up with all of this is almost like a full-time job in itself,
Yeah.
right? But I think you bring out a good point, and sometimes I worry, like I don't know, are these ideas outdated, and a lot of people hate on me and say, why are you still doing Firo? Why don't you move on and get better pay? And sure, those opportunities have been made to me in open, but in a way, I feel a lot of love for Firo and belief in the importance of what I do. I think you probably saw in the domination state
Hmm.
thing to say that, even if Firo doesn't, of course, I hope it succeeds, but even if it doesn't succeed, and it remains this fringe thing, if it has contributed to privacy or in some way, I would consider it a success. But hopefully, Firo succeeds in its own right. Obviously, that's
Yeah.
the number one goal. But like I mean, I truly believe in it. Like besides Firo, I also help like Naomi Brockwell like do privacy videos and stuff like that. So
Ah.
yeah, it's now become part of my life, right? So it's something that I hope to champion, and I guess Firo is a expression of that, and my love for that. Yeah.
Wow. It definitely. Are you the longest member still on the team?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, Paramin, he's the like
Ah.
the actual founder. He
Hmm.
isn't playing a really active role. I mean, I think he's now like studying in Stanford for like e-voting or something like that.
Oh. Wow.
Uh,
Oh,
uh,
casual. Okay.
yeah, I mean, yeah, he's a really cool guy, but obviously, right now, I think his focus isn't on Firo.
Hmm.
And I guess like the day-to-day stuff is left to me, but I still hold him in high esteem. And no, there's no like bad blood or anything.
Oh,
I
yeah,
would
yeah,
love
yeah,
to
yeah. Of
like, yeah,
course.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, yeah, that was great. Like I said, I have so many more questions. I have so many more to think about, but I know you're very busy running all the bajillion things that you and the fire team do. So I'm saying wrap up the interview here unless you have something else you want to add to the end. I don't want to keep you here all day.
No, I mean like I still have like around 15 minutes or so, but
Oh,
you got
I can
any
tell.
other
I
questions?
just want to be nice and let you. I don't want to be like 8 hour interview with Reuben.
I don't know, like obviously like these long form videos don't perform as well as the shorter ones, but maybe we can like like chapter it, and then
Oh, yeah, yeah.
it'll
No, I'm
be
gonna.
a lot
This
easier.
is gonna do because I've been working on Twitter, and this is gonna do numbers on Twitter. I'm gonna chop it up like all the quotables and like all the things are so great because they're so you don't hear them often, right? You don't hear people talking about assets helping the anonymity set of larger things, right? The question
Hmm.
is, do we want assets, NFTs, or money? Or it's like
Yep.
no one's
Yep.
talking about how they intersect. Also, I have one question. I know you have a law background, and I've been
Hmm.
googling about this myself. Is there do you have any fears about laws and privacy coins given what is happening to Tornado Cash given your deep, privacy coin background and your deep law background?
I mean, this is the question that I had to deal with very recently, like with the
Hmm.
whole tornado cash arrests.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Dutch law. I'm not very super familiar with Dutch law, but it was enforced in a very, I would say, oppressive way. I say in light of the crime that they said that he did, right? Like, okay, facilitating money laundering, which banks have been doing with, like, a slap on the wrist and no one goes to jail, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
HSBC, like laundering Sinaloa drug cartel stuff. And look, like that, they're still fine, too big to fail, right? Well, this guy, like, he built a smart contract, and suddenly, he's sitting in jail. I think it's already been definitely more than 6 months. I think 8 months, maybe now, or
Yeah.
more now. And some of my some of my developers were very scared. Like, say if they get targeted, what's going to happen, right? And obviously, if I start seeing core developers of other privacy projects, starting to get arrested, I would, as much as I love privacy, I don't love jail, right? So,
That's a quotable. That's a quotable.
I mean, it makes me sound
Yeah.
like a sellout that I'm not willing to
No,
die
no.
for my
That makes perfect
beliefs.
sense.
But
I also don't like Jill. For yeah.
yeah, so I mean, obviously, I'm trying to rush, kind of like, to get Firo to a state, where even if I stop and whatnot, someone else can take over and whatnot. And that's kind of like the beauty of what Spark is, right? It's still decently easy enough to understand that someone can take over even if the core team is forced to stop. And hopefully our code, our open source code is there for everyone to use, and I mean, like, I would say, because being in Malaysia, I think, like, these things are kind of like low on their list of priority of things to deal with, right?
Makes sense,
uh
yeah.
you know but at the same time, if governments start putting pressure, like, if I become like a Snowden or something like that,
Yeah.
obviously, I don't expect my government to protect me either, right? But for now, I think I'm okay. I don't think Firo is as prominent and in use in markets. But I feel that there's a growing narrative, right? That privacy coins are bad, that proof of work is bad, and as much as I champion Monero for, kind of leading the space in I guess, in a way, a thought leadership on privacy,
Hmm.
and like, being the number one market cap, it also doesn't do itself any favors, or privacy coins in general, when like, one of the talking points is that, yeah, Monero is being used in darknet markets, that's why we're legit, criminals
Hmm.
use us, that's why we're legit. I mean, I get it, I understand the arguments, I'm not disputing that, but
Yeah.
it's not, it doesn't it doesn't do us any favors, right? And obviously there will people be, fuck the government, fuck the, like, Monero is like above all of that and whatnot, right? But let's say, I'm pretty sure that even if Monero developers are like pseudonymous and whatnot,
Hmm.
a government can find out who they are. I don't think it's that difficult. I don't
Yeah,
think
that makes sense.
anyone has that amount of OPSEC. And if they start going after them one by one, how how resistant do you think you are? Do you think everyone wants to go to jail? No, I think most people. Right, right. So
Yeah.
so I think people have to be realistic, and sure, we should not power in the field of regulation and whatnot,
Hmm.
but we also should not be like, oh yeah, embracing KYC or stuff like that. But I think rather than painting this picture of, like, pure anarchy and pure, like, anti-government thing, mm, I think we should be giving, educated, nuanced arguments. And I think one of the biggest, like, people that have championed that is someone like Peter Van Valkenburg. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but he works at Coin Center, and
Oh yeah, I know
he
you're talking about. Yeah, yeah,
speaks.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think he's also like, I think he was an not advisor, but has some relation to Zcash and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And I feel like there is a line to be drawn, uh, between not working with governments, but like seeing
Mm-hmm.
how we can fit within the framework, without compromising our values, right? Because I mean,
Yeah.
some people have like some guys have said, "Oh, Ruben's a sellout," for talking about Firo being compliant with the travel rule. I'm like, I'm not compliant with the travel rule. Privacy coins are compliant with the travel rule. There's nothing wrong with stating that,
Yeah,
because
it's a fact.
it's a fact. And
Yeah.
like, I'm not doing anything. It's just that, people always say privacy coins are illegal, privacy coins and this and whatnot, and it feeds this shitty narrative. I'm saying no, we are compliant, not because we made ourselves, but under the existing rules we are. So stop spreading this shit that we're illegal and stuff like that, because most of the ban on privacy coins, with a few exceptions,
Mm-hmm.
are not law in themselves. They are regulators exercising their discretion, but they are not law. They're just like, we prefer you not to do privacy coins. Or if you do privacy coins, there's all these other like compliance things that you have to do, and it's going to be difficult, and exchanges worried about their businesses gonna, oh yeah, that's too much work, I'm not going to defend it, right? And we are seeing this growing trend, which is why I think that's why stuff like AMMs are important, because we don't expect market makers and
Mm.
all this stuff. We have to create markets for our privacy coins that allow us to, and that allow regular Joes to provide liquidity, and make those markets, rather than be completely reliant on order book base, which has its own set of pros and cons.
Oh yeah.
But I feel that it's something that we have to look into if we want to continue to be relevant, and we want to be censorship resistant. And I would say native support of AMMs are important, right? Because like, okay, like something like Serai is being developed as a cross-chain DEX that includes Monero and stuff like that, but it
Mm-hmm.
also requires its own blockchain. It requires its own token, as far as I understand from Luke, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Luke is not an unknown, right? So if how are you going to, if someone actually went after Sarah, if someone went after Luke, I mean, I wish him the best, and I have a very good relationship with Luke. I'm not wishing this or
Yeah,
anything bad, but it's just saying
yeah.
that if they really wanted to crack down, Sarah would also have problems of his own, right? At least in his current form, right? So that's why I think like native support of some sort of DEX or AMMs are important to continue that. But another thing that I also kind of want to say is that, like, there's also a balance between there's also a balance between transparency and everything should be mandatory private by default, right? Because once
Mm.
you start doing DeFi stuff, right, I would argue that some element of transparency is required. Mainly because, like, if you say, oh, my smart contracts are private, everything is private, what happens if you get hacked, right? You don't even know you're getting rugged. It's like you can't see crap,
Mm.
right? So sure, maybe the people being involved and whatnot, and who is transacting with who should be hidden, but there should be some,
Ah.
like, transparency, that you can see whether shit is working as intended, right? Because you know how risky DeFi is, right? We're seeing DeFi hacks
Oh
like
yeah.
every week, right? So those people are like, say, oh, confidential DeFi and
Mm.
all that and stuff. Like, be careful with what you wish for. Obviously, there are some other projects that claim to have private smart contracts, when the smart contracts are totally transparent.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, we know who we're talking
Yeah,
about, right?
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want to.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but I guess, like, I just wanted to kind of, like, counter that,
Mm.
right? Because I definitely understand the whole idea of mandatory privacy, and I understand this, but when you start dealing with DeFi stuff, when you start dealing with certain like cross-chain interactions, we have to think about like how these things
Uh,
actually fit in. So yeah.
could you entertain me for a bit? Like
Sure.
when you speak about this, the idea of a turnstile comes to mind. Like
Mm-hmm.
sort of like, is that how would you implement what you're thinking about? Is say for example like a Uniswap AMA. How would you take that, and like where would you put like how would you design that? I'm just so curious in that. That's a good point. Like how would you design? Also, if you don't know, this isn't a solved issue. I'm sure. So
Yes,
I'm
yes,
not
it's
expecting
not
you to solve
some
all the
issue.
issues in 30 sentences. Just like conceptually, would it be like a turnstile? Then you enter the AMA, and the AMA is sort of private. You can sort of catch like if a lot of there's an exit
I would
scam.
say like
Yeah.
the amount should be visible, right? But like
Oh,
the
okay.
people
Oh,
who is transacting with who is hidden, right? Like because
okay. So
right
stealth
because
addresses.
yeah, kind of like stealth addresses. Like yeah, I see something is happening, but I don't really know who, right? But at least I can see how much money is in there. Is something being drained or whatnot? I think those are important, at least in this state of the art, right? Or maybe there's some ZK way to do it, maybe, but uh, I would
Maybe.
still like caution, right?
Mm,
Like ZK is still kind of new. Like yes, not so
yeah.
new, but it's still new enough.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like like if you do a trade and
Mm,
whatnot, like maybe some transparency would be good. For most trades, right? And like I think that's something. It's going to be like a bit controversial, but like I personally don't want North Korea using like Firo, or something
oh,
like
that's
that,
definitely
right?
controversial. And some projects are like, we are
Yeah,
the
yeah.
official coin of North Korea.
Yeah, I mean, like I get it, right? Like
Yeah.
having North Korea use it is almost like an endorsement of the protocol, right? And I
Yeah.
get it, I get it. Like I'm not anti North Korea or anything like that. It's just more of like the ramifications of what that means. Once
Mm,
a nation state, because then everyone has an excuse to shut you down.
ah,
Regardless of whether it makes sense or not. Like like the tornado cash guy, right? I'm sure that if North
yeah.
Korea didn't do what he did, he wouldn't be in trouble, right? But yeah, so
Interesting.
obviously maybe some may argue to say that, oh yeah, if everything's private, you won't even know North Korea is using. Yeah, sure, maybe, but they tend to be, you cannot look at your chain in isolation, right? Like you have to see how it
Mm,
looks like. Even if you're in Firo, there's gonna be, if you're converting Firo into something else or whatnot, or bridging out, you cannot secure. They are still entry and exit points, right? So uh you may not be able to hide that you were using Firo. Even like if on chain you can't tell anything, right? I mean,
ah.
right? I mean, like
And
when you
that,
like, let's
that
say
makes,
if you hack a $500 million, like how North Korea did to Ronin, right? Like even if your protocol is completely private, how the heck are you gonna convert that money?
oh, okay, okay. So you would think something like a circuit breaker would help. Like this would be like if it's a large amount of money moving really fast, circuit gets blown, and
No, no, I
then
mean I'm not
maybe.
talking about the circuit blow, but I mean I'm saying that like if you already can see that uh happening, in and out of the protocol, right? Like for those
Ah, it
large
doesn't matter what
amounts,
happens then.
then well, if it's for most AMM transactions, if you
Mm,
expose the amount, it's not too bad. I think for most people you'll be fine unless you're trying to move North Korean amounts of money,
yeah,
right? That's
and
my
if I'm
point.
familiar, and if I'm familiar, AMAs have a lot of slippage, so they're not really optimized for like massive amounts of like money anyway, right? If I'm familiar
Mhm.
with like basic Uniswap,
Yeah, the
right?
basic Uniswap. Obviously, there are
Yeah.
ways to concentrate the liquidity in certain
Ah,
pairs,
yeah,
and
they did.
and
Ah,
that
V2,
yeah
of
that
course.
yeah that's V3, I think. Yeah,
V3,
uh,
okay.
yeah. I think that's interesting. Well, I'm not sure of V2. You
Mm,
might be right, but what I'm saying is that like
ah.
it's tricky, right? I mean, I haven't figured this all out. It's just thoughts at this point.
Yeah, and there's probably not one answer. I imagine different chains will take different approaches to this issue, right? I imagine there's not
Mm-hmm.
one like ultimate answer. That's really yeah, that's interesting to
Yeah.
see how privacy coins deal with that moving forward in the AMAs. and all of those things. What a good way to have a sort of private AMA would it
Mm.
be to maybe go back to having like rounded amounts
I
maybe?
think AMM, not AMA, right?
Sorry, AMM to have like rounded
Mm.
amounts maybe like like you have like I know you because I don't know because if you have a transparent, would I still be able to use it as an individual pretty privately, or do you how do you see that interacting with that?
I mean, all you can see is that, yeah, okay, someone has swapped this for this, right? But
Hmm.
then once it goes out, then it disappears, and you can transact how you want it to be, right? I mean, like, that's how I would see.
Oh, okay, I got you, I got you, I got you.
Yeah, like I
So
can
the
see
A, yeah.
the trait in the AMM happening, like what has swapped with what, but I
Ah,
cannot see who did it, where it goes after the AMM, right? So like I think once you put in your, like when you put in your money in the exchange, you don't really have that high expectation of privacy, but you do expect people not to know who is trading with who, right? So you
yeah.
place it into the AMM, some trades happen. You can see like the activity in the smart contract, which allows you to make sure that the smart contract is happening correctly and all of that. But then, once you do the trade and whatnot, it goes off. And I think for 99% of people, that will be good enough privacy, unless you're trying to move and convert very, very large amounts, which then those trades like, oh yeah, someone has converted X amount. But at that point, like I'm sure if you're trying to do that, there are other ways to also do it. So, I
Oh,
mean,
that's really. Who do
yeah,
you work on
that's
these
just my
ideas with?
thought.
Like, who do you work on
Uh,
these bounties ideas on? This is you're describing like one idea could be a whole coin, right? Like a whole token on Ethereum. You're like, yeah, just casually just do this. I'm like, is there like another development department? I know on the Lantis paper was Sarang, you, and I don't want to mess his name
Aram,
up. Aram, yeah. So
Aram.
that's a
Hmm.
pretty like who's like how big is the team these days?
Well, I mean, like, Sarang still works on us on a like hourly basis. So like, we
Oh,
get
okay,
some
okay, okay,
hours from
nice.
him. Yeah, because he's officially with CipherStack, right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
is
yeah,
like
yeah.
Diego's company. Aram is still with us. He's helping out to do the research and stuff like that. Um, I guess like there's a lot of like burden on me to kind of like come up with the general concepts
Yeah.
and and then go to the cryptographers or the other people and say like, can we do this? And like kind of like for example, like even though I had no role in like coming up with the cryptography for Spark and all of that, right? But like that whole evolution from Sigma to Lelantus to thing was kind of like my thing, like saying like, hey, is this possible? Can we do this? And then I send the cryptographers to go look at it and like kind of, oh yeah, like all right, let's do this, right? So I guess that's me stewarding, right? But
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, yeah. So obviously, I wish I had more people to talk with
Mhm.
because, like, I have some friends that I speak to, like Mikera from Hashcloak, Receipt
Wait, you're
from
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 Hash Cloak?
Arcadia. Mikera, yeah,
Hash Cloak.
Mikera Quintin Collins. Yeah, she her company actually did a Sparks audit, and
Oh, okay.
they're actually building a Meson mixnet, which is pretty interesting as well. So
What is? So you just casually drop it. I'm like, wait, what is that?
so mixed nets like it's like a network layer
Oh, yeah,
thing where you kind of yeah. So Mikera actually got famous because I think she received, was it like a 1,000 Ethereum like YOLO grant from Vitalik, and then I think she dropped out and then like went full time, and she's like self-taught, but she's really good at cryptography and stuff
oh,
like that. So
self-taught
she
photographers
does
are woof. Yeah.
so she does all this ZK stuff, and I think her main thing is ZK.
Hmm.
So actually she's doing work for few labs and all these things, like as an independent company that does work for a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
variety of projects, including Firo. So she's been like very generous of her time, and like, sometimes I was like, hey Mikara, what do you think of this? Because she's very in tune with what's happening in the ZK space and whatnot. She has interesting ideas. Even like Christy, who actually like kind of a lot of the ideas about mining and stuff like that, because she's a hardware expert. And she was the creator of ProcPow, which is now kind of what we use for our algorithm.
Hmm.
And she was also serving on our community fund committee for I think she just completed her term. So I guess like these people in the space are my friends, I talk with them and we share ideas. So it's always nice to meet, especially people who are multidisciplinary. I find that they have a much better, bigger picture, and I guess that's how the ideas come. And then I'll just go to my cryptographers or my researchers or my developers. I'm like, hey, can we do this? Like, does it make sense? I mean, I wish I could tell that myself, but
Hmm.
yeah, I have my own limitations. So, if anyone wants to take over my position and has more technical knowledge or be our CTO, please.
Are the cryptographers usually excited? Are they like, oh my god, another idea? Like I'm like still working on proving the last three. Like, what's the general response when you come by?
Aram is generally very receptive, and of course, I think we surround his research, like, if anything is to do about, he just loves research, right? So if it's
Okay,
something that's
makes
interesting
sense.
to him, he'll do it. But Aram, like, especially like we've been actually developing this like private voting protocol. Oh my god, we haven't even covered this. Okay.
There's so much.
Uh, yeah, yeah. Well, I guess very quickly, the private voting protocol is called Aura,
Hmm.
and this is a amazing. It could be its own project in itself, and we're actually kind of like stuck because because Aram, I think I don't know what year was it, but he's from Armenia, and he witnessed several people dying. I think they were killed in certain protests because they were challenging the results of the election. There was just a lot of
Mm.
distrust in all of that. And then that kind of made him like, surely there's a better way where, there could be maybe some sort of e-voting where people could be sure that their votes were not tampered with, that even the election organizer did not could not tamper or like, have break anonymity guarantees, right? And I guess that whole experience kind of shook him, and
Mm.
he was like, that's how he kind of got into cryptography, and like there must be a solution to this. Cryptography could possibly solve this, right? And if you take a look at his original papers before he was even working for Zcon and Firo, it was all about e-voting protocols and stuff like that. Of course, he's very talented. He came
Hmm.
up with Lelantus and all of this. But then after that, when he finished all this work with Spark and all that, he's like, I've gotten a lot of knowledge from developing these protocols. Now maybe I can apply it to the original problem that I set out to do, which was e-voting, right? So we actually have this paper called Aura, which is an e-voting protocol. I think it's on our website. To be completely honest, we don't really know what to do with it because it's a really good protocol in the sense that it has a trusted bot, but the bot has very little powers. Or it cannot break anonymity, it cannot, like change the votes or anything like that.
Oh, okay, yeah, 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 okay.
Like, so even if they collude, there's very limited things that they can do, and each voter can always check and be certain that their vote has been correctly counted, has not been modified, and all of that sort of stuff. So we created this protocol, and originally we had this big idea of implementing it into Firo's governance, right? But then we're like, well, I don't know how do we determine who has the right to vote, because we were against coin voting, right? And then we're like, we built this protocol. How are we gonna to get it to be
Mm.
used, right? And obviously we were thinking of other DAO governance, like how. And also the other thing that our protocol also protects is ballot progress, because that means, like right now with a lot of DAO voting, you can see, oh, how many percent has voted yes, how many
Yeah.
percent people, and that influences your vote as well, because you see like, oh yeah, so 80% have voted yes, I'm not gonna bother to vote no, right? I mean, that has a lot of implications, right? So we even designed this system to even have like multiple choice voting, ranking, and all this sort of like different ways of voting, not just like simple voting as well. So we figured
Oh
all this all
wow.
out, and we were like, this doesn't really fit into Firo's ecosystem, right? This might be better served in an ecosystem like Ethereum or whatnot, where there's a lot of these token governance projects that may want to use this, or not even just in DAOs, but in actual elections in the real world, right? But I was thinking to myself, like, given that this research came from Firo and technically was funded by Firo, right, in the right way because we pay our cryptographers and whatnot,
Yeah.
I don't think it would be fair to the Firo project if we took Firo funds to further develop this, like to actually build a proof of concept of this and whatnot, because it may not directly benefit Firo, right? It's just an interesting piece of research that we built, right? So we have been trying
Ah,
to think
okay.
like what do we want to we actually been trying to get funding to build like an infrastructure project, like to say that look, BSC or Ethereum, do you want us to further develop this, give us like some money and we'll develop a POC with a separate team for this. And I guess the only benefit to Firo would be like, hey, we're cool people, we develop cool work, right? And I guess one of the cool things that I wish that we could have done differently, but I don't know if you saw that. I think in 2018 or was it in 2019 we helped the Thai Democrat Party
Oh yeah, yeah,
run
yeah, yeah, yeah.
its yeah. So that was like 127,000 votes, and that was really cool. Like it was all done on chain and stuff like that. And obviously there were a lot of like lessons that we learned from that that was like not so ideal. And that's kind of like, wow, if we could do this again with this new system, that would be amazing. But because the candidate lost in the elections and there's been no political will to do this again, we haven't been able to do that. But yeah, so like it's in this kind of like limbo state where we kind of figured out how to do all of this. We know how this is to be done, but we don't have the funding to bring this forward. I mean, we could do it with Firo's funds, but I think that would not be fair to the Firo project. So
That makes
that's
sense.
kind of where we're at on that.
Oh wow. It'll probably get used one day. Like I mean, when ZKs were made, it was what 70s.
Yeah,
If you're not,
yeah, I
and
don't
so maybe
know.
it'll have its day eventually. No research is wasted research. That's definitely a tough pickle to be sitting on a gold mine that you can't really extract the value out of.
Yeah, and what of course, a lot of people say like, oh, you e-voting is flawed. We should just stick with paper and whatnot. Look, I mean, like, sure, it's a process. You don't jump there, right? I mean, sure, I don't think we should be using this protocol in like a national election right now.
Yeah,
But for lower priority, like lower threat level stuff, like sentiment, poll checking, like doing polling of your
yeah,
population on to get sentiment checks, that can be done using this system because I mean, I want to have my anonymity protected because I don't want to be singled out, right? But you're not
yeah.
so concerned about all this like other, threats because like yeah, it's just a sentiment check, right? And I feel like that's a very good way to get a system like this started and going, right? Rather than a full blown thing. And once people are more comfortable with it, once we kind of figure out any kinks or problems with, then yeah, maybe eventually actual like full on national elections on it, right? But I think it is also again intellectually lazy to say, oh no, will never work, and even some very prominent cryptographers and researchers say, yeah, evil thing will never work and stuff like that. But there are certain components that we can solve today, and doesn't necessarily have to use blockchain technology. Like Aura doesn't have to use a blockchain. It's just that blockchain is I guess a neutral bulletin board that we can put
Hmm.
stuff up, right? And I think that's interesting and you're not directly related to Firo, but I truly believe that if you want like a functioning democracy, like I recently looked up how Gallup 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 polling. How the US like, oh, what's the approval rating of the president and whatnot, right? I thought it was
Oh,
like
okay.
some complex way, but no, it's people calling people say, hey, what do you think of this president, right? Like really, this is the way we do polling, and if I get a call like that, I'm just hanging up, which means you're only capturing a very weird subset of people who are willing to spend the time to answer a
Yeah,
poll,
the
right?
fanatics,
Yeah,
you could say.
yeah, the fanatics or the old people who have nothing better to do, or like I don't
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
so
yeah.
so so I feel that if it was a way that we could get people to just on the app put in their sentiment and you see the results, and I think that might actually like obviously it's a revolution in itself in the way that governance of countries can happen, right? And especially in the more educated countries and stuff like that, I think it'll be
Mm-hmm.
particularly useful. And I hope to see more development in that regard, and hopefully Aura someday gets built. We're still trying,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. It takes time.
yeah, this, I mean, this is off topic, but I just thought it was a really interesting topic to talk about because we're all talking about privacy, cryptocurrency, and stuff, but privacy in voting to me is also very key. But what I've also found out is that many people don't really want privacy in voting, and even some of the governments that we approach are asking us, hey, can you build a back door for us and stuff like that. We're like, if you want to do that, you don't really need our system.
Yeah, like,
You
yeah,
can
yeah.
just.
Come on, like what are we doing here?
That's why I'm trying to argue to say that if you don't build a backdoor, you are saving so much money from hiring all these think tanks and polling companies, and you have direct access to poll your population or your voter base on what they truly think. And that to me is a huge advantage. I mean, if you're trying to
Yeah,
play to things, and people need to realize and look past the backdooring and trying to use it in malicious ways, but looking at ways to use this data, still privacy preserving, but using that data in a very educated way. And I think it could actually really revolutionize how democratic governments are run.
yeah, that makes sense. I know in America we face a big issue of voter turnout being like ridiculously low. So imagine an app where I can go through
Yeah.
private. I can just like, oh, how do you feel about this? Oh, I like this, blah blah, blah. And I can see
Yeah.
like a live like, or like when the poll's done. That's pretty. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Wow. I feel like this is gonna catch on eventually. Right now, people aren't catching on to it, but eventually, the work you're doing will definitely be rewarded.
Yeah. All right, I think I'm out of time, but
Yeah.
it's been a real pleasure
Hmm.
talking with you. I had a good time. I mean, like even just talking things with you, maybe kind of like solidify how I think about things.
Yeah.
So, thank you for that opportunity. And
Of course.
yeah, I mean this almost 2 hour
Oh yeah, no. This is. I'm gonna
interview.
cut this up and I'm gonna translate it and I'm gonna use like the AI to get it into text, do like a write up on it, cut up into like Twitter little bites, YouTube shorts.
Mhm.
You gave me like 2-3 weeks worth of material, which is really good because I find being in front of a camera difficult. So thank you so much that I can like just casually talk, listen, and soak up your knowledge for almost 2 hours. Give me so much material.